The dark silence before the storm. The galaxy was wide and endless, filled with billions of stars, countless worlds, and endless life. Yet in that great sea of light there were also shadows, dark corners where terrible things grew, and one such darkness had begun to spread. It moved like a storm swallowing planets, breaking civilizations, leaving nothing but silence behind from far away. A small desperate voice broke the silence. It was weak, trembling, filled with fear. An alien signal sent out into the cold, begging for help, begging for someone, anyone to hear. Their world was falling, their skies were burning, and their children cried with no answer. Across the stars, many civilizations heard that call, but none moved, none dared. They all remembered the name of the enemy, an empire of destruction, merciless and endless, a force that had already shattered dozens of systems, and none who resisted had survived. The galaxy had learned one lesson: never stand against the destroyers. But in that silence, in that fearful stillness, something stirred on a blue planet far away. On Earth, the humans listened. They were young compared to the great empires. They were considered reckless, dangerous, unstable. But when the signal reached them, they did not turn away. They did not close their ears. They answered. The desperate aliens could not believe it at first. No one had ever answered before. Their own allies had abandoned them, but humans, strangers, a species unknown to them, sent back a reply. A promise, the humans said. "We hear you. And we are coming," the galaxy whispered in shock. How could humans be so foolish? Why would they throw themselves into certain death? The destroyers' fleets were endless, their armies countless. No one had ever stopped them. Not once, not ever. Yet the humans prepared their ships, sharpened their weapons, and set a course straight toward the storm. The aliens who had cried for help watched with both hope and fear. Their people were broken. Their cities were in ruins. They had nothing left. But now they clung to this new promise. They prayed that these humans, strange and unknown, would truly come, would truly fight, and would truly save them. But whispers in the galaxy grew darker. Other civilizations warned, "Do not trust them. Humans are not saviors. They are chaos in flesh. They bring war wherever they go. They burn worlds. Even their own history is filled with blood." And yet, despite the warnings, despite the doubt, the desperate aliens waited. They had no other choice. Their skies thundered with the shadow of the enemy. The destroyers' fleets already surrounded their system, and only silence waited if no one came. So they held on to the small light, the small promise, that humans would arrive in the deep night of space. The human fleet began to move, engines glowing like fireflies in the dark, small compared to the monstrous armadas of the enemy, yet filled with a strange energy, an unshakable will. Humans had always been small compared to the universe, but they had always refused to bow on the command deck of the lead ship. Officers spoke in calm voices, their eyes steady, their hands ready. They knew the enemy was stronger. They knew the chance of victory was slim. But they also knew one truth: humanity did not abandon those who called for help, not when they had the power to fight. The silence of space grew heavier. The storm was near. The destroyers' fleets were gathering, and the humans drew closer. They did not shout. They did not send threats. They came quietly with steady hearts, with burning resolve, like hunters walking into the lair of a beast. The desperate aliens on their dying world looked up to the skies each night, searching for a sign, searching for hope. And one night they saw it. Distant lights piercing the black, ships breaking through the void. And though they were still far, still days away, the people wept, for they knew the humans had arrived. But the question remained: who were these humans truly? Were they saviors who would protect the weak, or were they storms in disguise, bringers of destruction wrapped in kindness? No one knew, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see the truth, waiting to see what the humans would bring. The dark silence before the storm stretched on, each second heavy with fear, each moment pulling tighter. The destroyers were already preparing their slaughter, but now, for the first time, someone stood in their way. Someone dared to answer the cry, and though the galaxy trembled, the humans simply whispered into the void, "We are coming." And so it began. The silence broke, the storm drew near, and the fate of worlds hung in the balance, all because humanity had chosen to rise. All because they could not ignore the call. All because in the endless night of the galaxy, when all others turned away, humanity stepped forward. First contact with fear, the alien world was broken. Its skies blackened by smoke, its oceans scarred by falling fire. Cities once filled with life now stood in silence, towers shattered, streets empty. and the people who survived hid in ruins, waiting, praying, wondering if the humans who promised help would truly arrive when the first human ships appeared above the planet. No one cheered, no one shouted in joy. Instead, there was only silence. The survivors stared upward with wide eyes, their hearts filled with both hope and terror. They had begged for help. But now that help had come, it felt almost unreal, too sharp, too strange. The ships were not like the enemy's vast dark armadas. They were smaller, sharper, and yet there was something unsettling about them. They carried a quiet menace, as if every metal surface hid fire, as if each shadow on their hulls held thunder. The survivors could not look away. They felt both saved and trapped at the same time. When the human soldiers descended, the fear only grew. The aliens had never seen creatures like them, tall, upright, moving with calm precision, their eyes scanning everything, their voices clipped and direct. The survivors trembled, not because the humans threatened them, but because the humans looked so ready, so calm, so familiar with war. The oldest of the alien leaders whispered, "They do not look like healers. They look like predators." The humans began to work immediately, setting up barriers, bringing supplies, treating the wounded. Their hands were steady, their words simple, but even in kindness there was something frightening. They carried their weapons close, as if kindness and violence lived side by side in them, as if mercy and destruction were both natural to them. The alien children watched the humans with wide eyes. Curious and scared, they saw the soldiers remove their helmets, revealing faces marked by scars, eyes that seemed both gentle and fierce. Some children tried to approach, but their parents pulled them back, whispering, "Stay away, they are not like us. They are something else." At night, the humans sang, their voices low, deep, and strange. They sat together, sharing food, speaking of Earth, speaking of oceans and forests and skies. But when their songs ended, they sharpened their blades, checked their guns, and prepared for battle with a discipline that shook even the bravest of the survivors. The alien refugees whispered among themselves. They smile as if they are kind, but their eyes are the eyes of hunters. The galaxy had always spoken of humans as reckless, as dangerous, and now the survivors began to see why. Humans carried hope in one hand and fire in the other. They came as saviors, but they also came as warriors. And for the first time, the refugees wondered if the two were truly different. On the edge of the ruined city, a human commander walked with one of the alien elders. The elder asked softly, "Why did you come? Why risk your lives for us when others would not?" The commander did not pause. He simply said, "Because you asked, and because we remember what it is like to be alone." The words struck the elder like a blade. They were simple yet heavy, filled with something deeper than mercy, something almost terrifying. For it was not pity that drove the humans. It was choice, it was will. They chose to stand, and when humans chose, they never turned back, but whispers spread in the ruins. Whispers of doubt. What if they fail? What if their fury brings the enemy down harder? What if they save us now only to destroy us later? The survivors watched as the human soldiers patrolled the streets, fixing broken machines, teaching alien fighters how to hold weapons, training them with strict voices and sharp eyes. And slowly the survivors began to understand. Humans did not wait for safety. They built it with their own hands, no matter the cost. Still, the fear remained, deep and heavy. The fear of what humanity truly was. The fear of what they might unleash when the storm finally struck. And soon the storm did come closer. Enemy fleets glimmered in the far sky, dark shapes gathering, preparing to finish the slaughter. The refugees trembled. And yet the humans did not. They stood steady, their weapons glowing faintly in the night, their ships humming with power, their eyes locked on the horizon for the first time in memory. The destroyers would not find silence. They would not find a broken people waiting for death. They would find humanity standing tall, standing ready. And though the refugees could not yet decide if this was salvation or doom, they knew one truth: the galaxy would never be the same again. The first contact had been made, and it was not soft, not gentle. It was filled with fear, with awe, with uncertainty. The aliens had begged for help, and humanity had come. But what they had brought was not only hope. It was something darker, something sharper, something the galaxy had never seen before. And as the skies began to glow with the approach of the enemy fleet, the refugees realized they were no longer just witnesses to their own survival. They were witnesses to the rising storm of humanity. And no one, not even the destroyers, could stop it. Warnings ignored. The news spread across the stars. Whispers carried from system to system. Humans answered the call. Some voices carried awe, others carried fear, for no one had ever dared to defy the destroyers, no one but humanity. In the shining halls of ancient alien councils, leaders gathered, their voices sharp, their faces pale with worry. The humans are reckless, one said. They do not understand what they are facing, another warned. If they fight, the enemy will answer with fury and more worlds will burn. Still another muttered, do not stand near them. They will drag us all into the grave. Yet the warnings were nothing but words, and words could not slow the human fleet. The humans listened politely, nodded at the fear of others, and then turned back to their work. Their ships moved forward, their weapons grew brighter, and their eyes were fixed on the storm that waited ahead among the desperate refugees. The warnings grew louder, some whispered, perhaps it is better if the humans leave. Better if we face death quietly, than invite a fire we cannot control. But others shook their heads. The humans are our only chance, and chance is better than nothing. The humans heard the whispers, but they did not turn back. They had come too far. They had made a choice, and once humans chose, nothing in the galaxy could make them retreat. It was not arrogance, it was not pride, it was something deeper. It was the simple refusal to let fear decide their path. In the ruins of the refugee world, human engineers worked day and night, repairing power grids, arming defense cannons, teaching alien fighters to stand again, to hold weapons again, to shout in defiance instead of crying in silence. It was strange to the refugees, strange and frightening, for the humans carried both kindness and cruelty in the same breath. One human officer trained a group of young alien soldiers. His voice harsh, his orders sharp. The aliens stumbled, their hands shaking, and one cried out, "We are not like you. We cannot fight as you fight." The officer stared at them with hard eyes and replied, "Then fight as you are, but fight." The words echoed through the camp. Simple, sharp, cutting through despair like a blade. The young aliens stood taller, not because they believed they could win, but because they realized they no longer had the choice to stay broken. Still, the galaxy did not trust messages arrived from other worlds, cold, fearful, filled with warnings. Leave while you can, the destroyers will crush you. Do not resist, surrender, hide, run. But the humans simply answered, we do not run. The commanders of the human fleet met in silence, their faces grim, their eyes filled with determination. They had heard every warning. They knew every danger, and yet they pushed forward, not blind, not foolish, but with a will that frightened even themselves. Because humanity had never been strongest, never been largest, but they had always been the ones who stood when others fell. The alien refugees began to watch them differently, at first with suspicion, then with awe. They saw how humans carried scars like trophies, how they laughed even when the night was heavy, how they sharpened blades as if preparing for a feast. The refugees could not understand, and yet they began to believe. Even if belief felt dangerous in the distant void, the destroyer fleets began to move, their engines a dark thunder, their shadows swallowing the stars, their numbers far greater than the human fleet. And yet the humans did not flinch. They studied the enemy movements, they measured every distance, and they planned quietly, ruthlessly, with the patience of predators waiting for the strike. The galaxy shook its head. It whispered again, the humans are blind. They are deaf to reason, but in truth, the humans were not deaf. They heard every warning, and they ignored them not out of madness, but out of choice, for humanity had never lived by fear. They had lived by fire. The refugees began to see it too. In every human step, in every human word, there was a dangerous certainty, the certainty that survival was worth any cost, that no enemy was too great, that no storm was too dark. It was terrifying, yet it was also the first light of hope many had felt in generations. The destroyers prepared their final strike. The galaxy whispered its last warning, do not fight them, no one survives them. But the humans looked into the void and answered with silence, a silence filled not with surrender but with promise. Promise of a storm that even the destroyers had never faced. Warnings had been given, warnings had been shouted, but humanity ignored them, not because they were blind, but because they had already made their choice, and that choice was war. And as the human fleet gathered, engines burning, weapons ready, hearts unshaken, the galaxy held its breath, for the silence before the storm was ending, and when the storm broke, it would carry the mark of humanity, unyielding, unstoppable, unforgettable, humanity's shadow. The destroyer fleets moved closer with each passing day, their dark shapes stretching across the stars like a growing storm. The galaxy waited in silence, fearing the clash, whispering prayers that the humans would retreat before it was too late. But the humans did not retreat. They built, they trained, and they prepared. And in their preparation, something strange began to show. Something the refugees had never seen before. Something they could not name but could only fear at night. The refugees watched the humans around their campfires. The humans laughed, shared stories, and sang strange songs, their voices deep and raw. They spoke of home, of oceans that roared, of mountains that pierced the sky, of deserts endless and cruel. They spoke of storms that broke cities and of people who endured them anyway. Their words were simple yet heavy, and the refugees realized that these humans had lived with chaos all their lives, and they had grown to love it, to shape it, to rise inside it. When the songs ended, the laughter faded. The humans grew quiet, their eyes cold, their hands busy with weapons, cleaning, sharpening, preparing. The firelight glinted on their faces, and in that glow the refugees saw something terrifying. Humans carried two faces, one of warmth and one of fire. Kindness in the day, but shadows at night. Mercy on their lips, but war in their hearts. One alien elder whispered to another, "They are not saviors. They are storms wearing skin." The human commanders walked among their soldiers, their voices steady, their orders clear. And even when fear crept into the refugee hearts, the humans showed none. It was not that they lacked fear, it was that they carried it differently. They turned it into iron, into fire, into action. And that frightened the refugees more than the enemy itself for the first time. The refugees began to ask themselves a question. If humans can unleash such fury against our enemies, what would they unleash against us if they ever chose to turn? It was a thought none spoke aloud, but all felt in the stillness of night. The humans were saviors, yes, but they were also something else, something deeper, something darker. The shadow of humanity stretched long across the ruins, and no one could escape it. The galaxy had always feared humans, calling them reckless, unstable, dangerous. And now those old whispers began to sound like truth. Because humans did not prepare for war like others. They did not mourn before battle. They sharpened their courage with laughter. They carried scars with pride. They looked at death as if it were an old companion rather than an enemy. And that truth made the refugees tremble. Yet the refugees could not turn away, for in that shadow, there was also light. Humans treated the wounded with gentle hands. They lifted children from the rubble. They repaired broken machines with patience. They built defenses with care. They gave food when their own supplies ran short. They gave hope when no one else could. And that contradiction was the most terrifying thing of all, because it meant humans were not one thing or the other. They were both, and no one could predict which side would rise next. One night, a child asked a human soldier, "Why do you smile when death is so near?" The soldier looked down, his face lit by the fire, and answered softly, "Because fear does not feed us, but courage does." The words spread like sparks among the refugees, simple, sharp, unforgettable, and they realized that perhaps this was the human secret, not strength, not weapons, but the ability to carry both fear and courage in the same heart, and to let courage win every time. Still the shadow lingered, for the refugees could not ignore the truth when humans looked to the sky. They did not pray for safety. They planned for battle. When humans touched their weapons, they did not tremble. They smiled. When humans thought of the coming storm, they did not see doom, they saw challenge. And the shadow of that truth stretched across the galaxy far beyond the ruined world. Alien civilizations continued to watch, some in secret, some in silence, some in fear. They spoke in hushed tones. Humanity has awakened. They will not stop. They will not rest. They will fight until the galaxy itself shakes. And none knew whether to feel hope or dread. The refugees began to whisper too. We asked for help and they came, but what have we truly invited? What force have we brought into our lives? They looked at the humans and saw not just soldiers, but storms wrapped in flesh, storms that could protect or destroy, and they wondered which side of the storm would strike when the battle began. In the deep silence of space, the destroyer fleets grew closer, their shadows swallowing the stars, and the human fleet waited, steady and unshaken, their ships glowing with hidden fire, their commanders watching every movement, every shift in the darkness, ready to strike, ready to burn, ready to show the galaxy what humanity truly was. The shadow of humanity had been revealed, and it was not a thing of mercy alone, nor a thing of cruelty alone. It was both, and it stretched far, and it grew stronger with every breath. The refugees shivered beneath it. The galaxy trembled at it, and the destroyers, though they did not yet know, were about to meet it. And in that long silence before the first battle, the refugees realized one truth. The galaxy had begged for help. Humanity had answered. But humanity had not come as saviors. They had come as storms, storms that could never be contained. The first strike. The night sky above the refugee world trembled. Distant lights appeared on the horizon of space. Dark and endless, the destroyer fleets had come. Their ships were massive, countless, spreading across the stars like a curtain of death. The refugees fell into silence, their voices caught in their throats, their hearts broken before the battle even began. The humans stood at the edge of the city, on walls rebuilt with their hands. Inside, ships armed with weapons polished until they shone, their faces calm, their voices steady, their eyes sharp. There was no panic, no begging, no surrender. Instead, there was only waiting, waiting for the storm to break, waiting for the enemy to strike. The destroyers moved with arrogance. Their engines burned red, their shadows swallowing every star. They had crushed 100 worlds before, and they believed this one would be no different. They did not fear the humans. They did not even think of them as worthy to the destroyers. This was already won. But then the first shot was fired, and it did not come from the destroyers. It came from humanity. The human fleet moved like hunters in the dark, their ships smaller, faster, weaving through the void like blades of light. They struck not at the strongest parts of the enemy, but at their weak points. Supply lines, communication relays, hidden engines. The destroyers reeled in confusion, their massive ships groaning under the sudden blows. The refugees stared in disbelief. They had expected to see humans crushed in the first breath of battle, but instead they saw fire and thunder unleashed, human ships diving and striking with deadly precision, each shot burning holes in the enemy's pride, each maneuver mocking their size and power. It was not defense, it was attack. Fierce and unyielding on the ground, human cannons roared, their fire tearing through the first waves of enemy drones. The ruins of the city became a fortress. Every street turned into a trap, every shadow filled with soldiers ready to strike. The humans fought not with desperation, but with fury, not with fear, but with cold, sharp skill. And the refugees could not believe what they saw for the first time. The destroyers hesitated, their endless arrogance cracked. They had expected surrender, silence, weakness. Instead, they found resistance, fire, destruction. And in that moment, the galaxy's oldest predators felt something strange, something sharp, something they had not felt in centuries. They felt fear. The human commanders moved with calm voices, their orders quick and clear. Their soldiers answered without hesitation, and the battlefield became a storm of steel and fire. Yet in the heart of that storm, the humans laughed not with joy, but with something deeper, something dangerous, as if the chaos itself was fuel for their souls. The refugees huddled in shelters, watching from screens, their eyes wide, their breath shallow. They whispered, "They fight like no one we have ever seen. They fight as if war is home to them." And for the first time in generations, their whispers were not of despair, but of awe. The destroyers tried to regroup. Their fleets tightened, their weapons turned, their fury rose. But the humans did not let them breathe. They pressed forward, every attack more brutal than the last. Every strike aimed to break not only ships but spirit, and slowly, piece by piece, the massive armada began to crack in orbit. The first destroyer capital ship burned. Its fire stretched across the sky like a falling star. The refugees cried out in shock. They had thought these ships could never fall. Yet humanity had proven otherwise, and the shadow of the destroyers wavered for the first time. Still, the battle was not won. For every enemy ship destroyed, 10 more remained. For every victory, a new wave of death swept forward. The humans fought with fury, but they bled too. Ships torn apart, soldiers falling. And yet even in loss, even in death, they pressed on, refusing to retreat, refusing to yield, carrying their rage forward with unshakable will. The refugees trembled, for they saw something new, something terrifying. Humans were not strongest in numbers, nor in power, but in defiance, in their refusal to break. And that refusal cut deeper into the destroyers than any weapon ever could. The first strike was not enough to win the war, but it was enough to shatter an illusion. The illusion that the destroyers were untouchable, the illusion that resistance was pointless, the illusion that no one could stand against them. For now someone had stood, and not only stood, but struck as the enemy fleets pulled back to regroup. The battlefield glowed with burning wreckage, the air filled with smoke and fire. The humans did not cheer, they did not celebrate. They simply tightened their grip, reloaded their weapons, and prepared for the next wave, because they knew the destroyers would return. Stronger, angrier, hungrier. The refugees wept, not only for their dead, but for something new, for hope. Sharp and dangerous, for the first time they saw a future where survival was not impossible, where death was not the only answer. And it was humanity who had given them that vision. Humanity who had struck the first blow against the storm. But deep inside their hearts, another thought whispered, a thought that would not leave. If humanity can strike like this against our enemies, what would happen if one day they strike against us? The first strike was victory and warning both. It was light in the darkness and shadow on the horizon. It was the sound of a galaxy awakening to a new truth, that humanity was not just another species. Humanity was the storm, and the storm had only begun yielding destruction. The first strike had ended. The battlefield still burned. Wreckage drifted across the sky like shattered stars. The refugees stared at the flames with wide eyes, unable to believe what they had seen. The destroyers, the terror of the galaxy, had been pushed back, not defeated but wounded. And it was humanity who had done it. But humans did not stop. They did not wait for thanks. They did not rest in their small victory. Instead, they prepared to strike again, to carry the fight beyond the ruined world, to push forward into the heart of the enemy. It was madness to the refugees, madness to the galaxy. But to the humans, it was simply survival. Survival that demanded not only defense, but destruction. The human fleet moved through the void like fire spreading across dry grass fast. Relentless, merciless. Each battle was short, sharp, and brutal. The destroyers tried to regroup, to answer with overwhelming force, but humanity refused to meet them with fear. Humanity cut their supply lines, broke their command centers, shattered their hidden bases. They fought with precision, with calculation, with a fury that made the stars themselves tremble. Everywhere the humans went, the story followed. Whispers carried across systems. The destroyers are losing, the humans are burning them. And for the first time in centuries, the predators who had devoured worlds began to retreat. They had never known defeat, and now defeat came again and again, delivered by hands too small, ships too few, but wills unshakable. The refugees who once trembled at the shadow of the destroyers now trembled at the shadow of humanity. They saw how humans fought, how they refused to stop, how they destroyed not only fleets but the very roots of the enemy. Shipyards turned to ash, fortresses broken to dust. Even homeworlds of the destroyers burned beneath human fire. Alien councils gathered again, their voices louder, their fear sharper. The humans go too far, one cried. They are not only saving, they are conquering. Another hissed, do you not see? They will not stop, they will not rest. When the enemy is gone, what will they do next? And the fear was not wrong, for humanity did not fight like defenders. They fought like hunters, pushing, pursuing, chasing the enemy across every star. They did not wait for the storm to reach them. They became the storm, and wherever they passed, nothing stood. The destroyers grew desperate. They sent their largest fleets, their greatest weapons, but every clash ended the same, with human ships breaking through, with human soldiers carving paths through impossible odds. And though humanity bled, though they lost lives, they never bent, they never yielded. They carried their fury into every corner of the war. The refugees followed in awe and dread. They had been saved, yes, but now they watched a force unleashed that no one could control. Even allies stepped back, keeping their distance, afraid to stand too near, for the fire of humanity burned both enemy and friend if the line was crossed. One refugee leader asked a human commander, "Why do you fight so far? Why not stop now that we are safe?" The commander looked at him with cold eyes and answered, "Because safety does not last if you leave the enemy alive." The words spread like thunder, shaking every heart that heard them. The galaxy realized the truth. Humanity was not here only to protect, they were here to end the threat, to end the terror, to end the enemy completely. And nothing, not reason, not fear, not warnings, would make them stop. Planet after planet fell back into silence, not because the destroyers ruled them, but because humanity had burned the destroyers out of existence. And in that silence, the galaxy began to whisper a new truth. If they can do this to their enemies, what will they do if one day they choose us? The fear grew, spreading alongside the awe, because humanity had shown not only mercy, but unyielding destruction. They had shown that they could lift a species from despair, and in the same breath they could erase another from the stars. It was salvation and doom carried in the same hands, and no one could predict which hand would rise next. The destroyers fought their last great battle at the edge of their empire. Thousands of ships filled the void, their weapons blazing, their voices a roar of rage. But humanity met them head-on, and the void itself seemed to scream. Stars drowned in fire, worlds shook, and in the end, it was not the destroyers who stood. It was humanity, scarred, bleeding, but unbroken. When the war finally began to fade, when the last destroyer fleet burned and scattered into ash, the galaxy was silent. Silent not in despair but in fear, for they had seen what humanity could do. They had seen what humanity had chosen to do, and they knew the truth. The storm was real, and it was human. The refugees wept, their children safe, their world freed, their skies clear for the first time in years. But even in their gratitude, even in their joy, they trembled, because the same force that had saved them could just as easily erase them, and they did not know which future awaited humanity had brought unyielding destruction, not just against their enemies, but against the illusion that the galaxy was safe, against the lie that no one could resist, against the silence of fear. And now every world, every species, every leader whispered the same question: what will the humans do next? The legacy of humanity. The war was over. The destroyers were gone, their fleets shattered, their fortresses silent, their worlds turned to ashes drifting across the stars. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was free of their shadow. But the silence that followed was not peace. It was something heavier, something deeper, a silence filled with the memory of what had been unleashed. The refugees returned to their broken homes, rebuilding their cities, planting seeds in burned soil, teaching their children to laugh again. And when they spoke of survival, they always spoke the same words. The humans came, and yet those words carried more than gratitude. They carried fear, because everyone remembered how the humans had fought, how they had destroyed without hesitation, how they had marched into the storm and become the storm itself. In the grand halls of alien councils, leaders argued endlessly. Some cried, "The humans are our saviors, we must honor them. We must stand beside them," others hissed. "The humans are too dangerous. They will turn their fire on us next." And still others whispered, "Perhaps it is best to leave them alone, to never test their wrath." The galaxy was divided, awe on one side, dread on the other, but in the middle stood the truth. Humanity had changed everything. Forever on the worlds where humans had fought, survivors told stories. They spoke of soldiers who shared food with starving children, of engineers who rebuilt water wells before they repaired their own ships, of doctors who worked until they collapsed from exhaustion. They spoke of mercy, of kindness, of hope brought by strangers from the stars, but they also spoke of shadows, of fleets that left nothing behind but smoke, of enemies crushed without mercy, of laughter heard in the middle of battle, cold and sharp, of eyes that looked at death as if it were nothing. They spoke of storms that carried both salvation and ruin, and they called those storms humanity. Children grew up with those stories. They drew pictures of humans with shining weapons and scarred faces. They whispered about them as heroes and also as monsters. No one knew which truth was greater. No one could decide if the humans were light or shadow, only that they were both on Earth. Humanity mourned its dead, but they also stood taller. They had not fought for conquest, they had not fought for glory. They had fought because a cry for help had reached them. And they had answered, yet in answering, they had revealed themselves to the galaxy. They had shown what they were capable of, and the galaxy could never unsee it. The destroyers had ruled with terror, but humanity had destroyed them with fury, and now every species knew if humans chose to fight, no empire was safe, no tyrant could endure, no predator could sleep without fear. And that knowledge was a weapon far sharper than any blade. Some alien leaders sent messages of thanks, pledges of alliance, promises of friendship, but their words shook with unease because friendship with humanity meant standing beside a storm, and storms could not be controlled. Storms could only be endured in the shadows of quiet worlds. Other voices spoke, voices filled with fear. The humans will not stop, the humans will grow, and one day their fire will fall on us. And so seeds of doubt spread alongside seeds of hope, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what path humanity would choose next. Among the refugees, one elder spoke to her people, her voice trembling but strong. "We begged for help, and they came and they saved us. But never forget, they did not come as gods. They did not come as demons, they came as humans, and humans are both." The legacy of humanity was not simple. It was not only victory, it was not only destruction. It was the proof that choice mattered, that will mattered, that courage mattered more than fear. The galaxy had seen power before, but never will like this. Never a species that refused to kneel, that refused to surrender, that chose to rise even when outnumbered, even when doomed, and so stories spread, carried across systems. Written in whispers, told around fires, humans became legend. Some called them saviors, some called them monsters, some called them storms, but all agreed on one truth. When humanity rises, the galaxy changes. The stars shone quietly now, but the silence was different. It was no longer the silence of despair. It was the silence of waiting, of watching, of wondering, for every world asked the same question, whispered in different tongues but carrying the same weight. If humanity chooses to protect, who can stand against them? And if humanity ever turns, who could survive them? The answer was simple, and it spread like fire through the hearts of all who had witnessed the war. No one. That was the legacy of humanity. Not only the fall of the destroyers, not only the salvation of the broken, but the shadow that now stretched across the stars. A shadow filled with mercy and fire, kindness and fury, light and darkness. A shadow that could never be forgotten. And as the galaxy turned, as the stars continued to burn, one truth echoed louder than all others. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again.